Hello everybody, Dr. Dan here. This is an explanation of the Employment Life Cycle project. I believe you will really enjoy this activity. It is an activity that will not just take 1 week to complete, but actually the entire course. So as you are going through the course and learn about the various materials, begin immediately to work on this project, and you'll be very thankful later because there's a lot of information, and by working on the project right from the beginning, you're better able to retain the information and include it in that presentation. So then once you get to the final week, all you have to do is submit it. The first document I've created for you is the actual instructions. So read through these in great detail. I even have instructions of how to record the presentation. So this is a two-stage process. You will use PowerPoint to create slides for each part of the actual presentation, and then you will record audio and video for each of the slides. So read this very carefully. I have provided you with a template to use, so that way you get off to a really great start. And I also provided for you, just in case you've never used that feature, PowerPoint, I did provide you with detailed instructions how to do that. Let's go ahead and take a look here at the PowerPoint presentation I created for you. So here's the template. All you have to do is submit your name, class number, name, and the date on the first page. By all means, if you want to change the design for some reason, you're welcome to do that. I also do encourage you to include various pictures, images, tables, graphs, figures, whatever on the pages to help supplement your presentation. The goal here is to have a very high quality presentation that technically you could give to perhaps even your current employer and say, look, here is a plan that I created that I believe will help us improve the various aspects of the employment cycle that we have. Included in this plan, you will address the 5 main components of an employee's what you'd call life cycle. So from recruitment and selection, the training, development, evaluation, and eventual termination of the job, whether it's their choice or otherwise. And then the cycle begins again. And then within each of these components, then you will be also addressing, and let me pull that up for you here, then you will be addressing the various other components of that life cycle. Legal, ethical challenges, performance management, climate, and culture. So you'll intertwine each of those components into recruitment, selection, training, development, and evaluation. And I'll give you an example of that here shortly. So here is your table of contents. You can add to that as needed. So for some reason in recruitment, you want to add another bullet here for the type of recruitment that you're going to use. So perhaps you would type that information right here, and you can improve your table of contents that way. Then the next stage of this presentation will be to actually explain the employment life cycle. What you may want to do is explain this perhaps near the end of the course when you better understand all of these various components and how they fit together. When you record your presentation, you can record that for each slide. So you don't have to record this right away, but you can come back to it. But what you will be expected to do is give a general discussion of what the employment life cycle is and how these various components interact with each other. I created a presentation for you in week 1, so you'll watch that. Essentially, you'll be doing the same thing or something similar yourself. Again, that's a great way to really learn about and retain the information about this employment life cycle model that I've created for you. And then on the template, finally, I have created just the beginning. Here's just the first slide, the basics of this first slide. Again, I highly encourage you to add pictures, tables, graph figures, whatever to it. And then you may be changing these various bullet points as you go along. Now let me just briefly describe for you what's going to be expected in each of the slides as you address those 5 main actionable items that you will be addressing, including in recruitment, selection, training, development, and evaluation. All right, what do you have to do? Well, okay, so back here again, what do we have? We have these action, of course, you're going to be talking about your action plan, and then how those items address legal, ethical, performance management, climate, and culture. So let's go ahead and move that right over here. forgive me. And let me just try to come up with a brief example. So let's say your action plan for recruitment is, and mind you, you have to use evidence to support all these items. You can't just make something up, like use Facebook to recruit employees or use LinkedIn. You have to have justification for every one of these. It's a key component of this entire presentation. So you'll be citing literature on every single one of these slides. But let's just say for the fun of it that we use LinkedIn for recruiting. So what we put over here for your action plan is I might just simply type in LinkedIn, and then I will describe in my presentation what research literature I use to support that, why that will improve the recruitment process. Then legal challenges and considerations. So what that will entail is essentially, when using LinkedIn, what do we have to consider when it comes to legality of that? Privacy, how are we going to address fairness? How are we going to, whatever it may be that has to do more with legal issues. And I shouldn't necessarily even say fairness per se, but perhaps discrimination maybe, or something like that. But just consider what challenges there might be by using that specific actionable item that you're going to use in recruitment. And you may have more than one. It might not just be LinkedIn and other things based on the literature you discover, but that's, again, this is just an example. And actually, again, LinkedIn might not necessarily be a great example. It might not be evidence-based. I'm just using that for this example here. Then you'll address ethical challenges and considerations associated with that. So I might consider, okay, using LinkedIn is a good strategy. However, ethically, we want to consider this, whatever that may be. Performance management. Now we want to explain, okay, how does performance management fit within this actionable item? How are we going to, for instance, track the process to make sure, so that's where performance management comes into play. How are we going to manage the HR folks? How are we going to look at them? How are we going to make sure that they are doing this process correctly, that they're using it correctly, and that the process is actually working? So that's that sort of evaluation, if you will, of the entire process. So you'll be doing that again for each one of those 5 components of that employee life cycle. You look at how performance management fits within that. And then climate. How will this method we're going to use for recruitment in this specific example help improve the climate within the organization? How will perhaps the various items that we look for among job candidates using this method, how will that improve the climate in the organization? And then finally, the culture. How does this method fit within the rules, regulations, values, norms, all of those, our mission statement within the organization? How does all that fit within the overall culture and will contribute to the overall, will add climate to that overall climate and ultimately culture of the organization? So that's, again, a summary of one example, what you might do for recruitment. Don't use that example of LinkedIn, and again, unless you had some sort of research to support that as an evidence-based strategy, which I'm not so sure you'll find that, but you may in a larger context of things. I'll just end it at that. Ultimately, you're going to do this for each one of those 5 critical areas of the employment life cycle. So by the time you are done, you'll provide a summary of how this action plan will improve the overall organization. You should find this really interesting and a fascinating project, which you will then turn in at the end of week 5 of this particular class. Thanks a lot, everybody, and I just hope you really enjoy this project.